Some of the wildest tech and vehicle ideas ever created didn't change the world. They got abandoned and forgotten. From a Ferrari buried in an LA backyard to Cold War power experiments, flying tanks, and Bluetooth masks, these aren't just fails. They're full-on mystery stories. In this countdown, we're diving into the 20 strangest abandoned technologies and vehicles ever found that were hyped, funded, and launched, only to crash, flop, or straight up vanish. Ferrari heist. Ever heard of a Ferrari just chillin' underground like it's some kind of buried treasure? Well, back in 1978, that's exactly what happened in the middle of Los Angeles. A group of kids were just messing around in a backyard, digging holes for fun, when they hit something solid. Turns out, it was a whole Ferrari Dino 246 GTS, buried 6 feet under. Now, here's where things get wild. This wasn't some junker someone forgot about. The dyno was in decent shape, green paint still fresh, chrome trim shining. But how the heck does a $20K luxury car from 1974 end up buried like a mob secret? When the cops got involved, they traced it back to a stolen vehicle report. Turns out, the original owner reported it missing not long after buying it. And yep, insurance had already cut him a check. That's when investigators started connecting the dots. This wasn't just a stolen ride, it was straight-up insurance fraud. Dude actually hired some guys to steal the car and dump it. But those goons? They didn't follow through. Instead of ditching it in the ocean like planned, they buried it. For real. Just straight up put a Ferrari in the dirt like it was a time capsule. Arctic land beast. Deep in the frozen wilds of Alaska, there's a rusted beast just sitting out there like it crash landed from another planet. This monster? The VC-22 Snow Freighter. And no joke, it looks like something out of a Cold War sci-fi flick. Back in the 1950s, the US was big on prepping for Arctic survival and moving gear across frozen terrain. So they came up with this insane creation. Nearly 280 feet long, 24 wheels, and powerful enough to haul supplies across the snow like a freaking land train. Oh, and it had living quarters inside for a crew of 4. Yeah, this thing was built for the long haul, but here's where it all went sideways. During one of its early missions, the Snow Freighter hit a frozen creek bed. The drive gear busted, and boom, game over. Too big to tow, too expensive to fix, so they just left it. And now, it's still out there in Alaska, completely abandoned, slowly being swallowed by the cold. Makes you wonder, what other wild tech did we dream up and then ditch when the plans went bust? The VC-22 was ahead of its time, no doubt, but today, it's just chillin' in silence, frozen in place like a ghost of the past. Russia's Lightning Lab, tucked away in the woods near Istra, Russia, there's a place that looks like it belongs on another planet. Massive metal towers, twisted cables, and structures that look straight up futuristic. Welcome to the abandoned high-voltage testing facility that folks now call Russia's Tesla Tower. Built during the Cold War era, this open-air complex was designed to generate insane amounts of electricity, enough to fake lightning storms. We're talking full-on lightning bolts crackling through the sky, all created by these giant Marx generators. But here's the kicker. No one really knows what all this was for. Some say it was part of a top-secret Soviet plan to harden military tech against electromagnetic pulses. Others think it was just about energy experiments gone wild. But the real story? Still murky. The facility's deets were locked down for decades, and even now, the exact scope of its work is still hush-hush. What we do know is that when they fired this baby up, the sky lit up like a concert light show. The noise? Deafening? The voltage? Enough to fry your phone from a mile away. And now? It's all just sitting there, rusted, eerie, and weirdly beautiful. Russia's Lightning Lab wasn't just some backyard science project. This was industrial-strength electricity on a level we still don't totally get. The flying fail tank. Alright, this one's straight up wild. Flying tanks. Yeah, you heard that right. Back between the world wars, military minds across the globe actually tried to slap wings on tanks and send them soaring through the sky. Sounds like something out of a comic book, but this was a very real idea. The goal? Drop an armored vehicle right into battle with its crew inside, ready to roll the second it hits the ground. No need for cargo planes, no need for setup. Just launch, glide, and go. The Soviets gave it a shot with the Antonov A-40, basically turning a tank into a giant glider. Britain and Japan weren't far behind, all working on their own versions of the flying tank fantasy. But here's the problem. They were way too heavy. Tanks in flight? Not exactly a match made in heaven. Once airborne, they couldn't fly far, couldn't steer worth a damn, and needed aircraft strong enough to tow them, which barely existed back then. The whole idea started falling apart fast. After a few shaky test flights and a lot of wasted resources, everyone kind of looked around and went, yeah, nah. The concept was officially scrapped. Still, you gotta admit, the ambition was next level. Imagine being the poor guy strapped inside a tank with wings, hoping you don't crash and burn before even reaching the fight. Mono-wheel madness. Ever heard of a vehicle that looks like it escaped a sci-fi movie? Meet the mono-wheel. One giant wheel, one brave soul sitting inside it, and a whole lot of chaos. Sounds cool in theory, but in practice? Total mess. This idea has been spinning around since 1869, believe it or not. Engineers from Europe to the US were hyped on creating a futuristic vehicle that was compact, fast, and just flat out different. Some were gas-powered, some electric, but all of them had one thing in common. They were almost impossible to control. Steering? Sketchy. Braking? Even worse. If you hit the gas too hard, the whole thing would just roll forward and toss you like yesterday's trash. And going downhill? Forget about it. Mono wheels were more like carnival rides than reliable transport. Despite the chaos, inventors kept trying. The designs kept evolving, looking wilder every time. Some even added jet engines or tried to enter racing circuits. But in the end, the mono wheel flopped hard. Just not practical, not safe, and definitely not road-ready. Still, you gotta give them props for pushing the limits. I mean, who wakes up one day and says, you know what'd be lit? Riding inside a giant spinning tire. So why do these things keep popping back up in modern tech shows and viral videos? Maybe it's the aesthetic. Maybe it's the dream that one day someone will finally crack the code. But for now, mono wheels are sitting in the garage of history, right next to flying tanks and lightning towers. Hoverboard hype crash. Who hasn't dreamed of riding a real hoverboard since Back to the Future? That slick, floating ride had us all thinking we'd be gliding to school by 2020. But spoiler alert, reality hit hard. Real-life hoverboards? Yeah, they exist. Technically. A few companies have built working prototypes using magnets, air pressure, even jet engines. They look dope in promo videos, but here's the catch. They're crazy expensive, super loud, and can only hover for a few minutes before crashing back to Earth. Take the Lexus hoverboard. Used magnetic tracks but needed a custom-built skate park. Then there's the Flyboard Air, a jet-powered beast that can fly over water for like 10 minutes. Not exactly your daily commute solution. And don't even get me started on the two-wheeled hoverboards that don't even hover. Just a rebranded Segway with trust issues. Despite all the hype and millions thrown into R&D, the dream never quite took off. Flight time's weak, balance is sketchy, and unless you've got a private runway and stacks of cash, you're not riding one anytime soon. So how did something that had so much buzz end up collecting dust in the forgotten tech pile? Meow translator fail. All right, pet lovers, this one's gonna have you saying, for real? There was actually a time when people thought they'd cracked the code to talking with cats. Yup, I'm talking about the cat translator. Back in the early 2000s, a device called Meowlingual hit the scene, claiming it could decode your cat's meows and facial expressions into plain old human speech. I'm hungry. I'm moody. Pet me now. You name it. Sounds lit, right? Well, not so fast. The idea was to bridge the gap between feline and human. But spoiler alert, cats don't actually talk like that. Every meow, purr, or tail flick means something different depending on the cat. So the tech? Yeah, it was basically guessing. And not very well. Most users said the translations were super random or just flat out wrong. Still, the hype was real for a hot minute. People were out here dropping cash, hoping their kitty would finally explain why it knocked a glass off the counter at 2 a.m. But when the novelty wore off, so did the sales. The whole thing faded faster than a cat running from a vacuum. So here's the deal. Was it cute? Sure. Was it useful? Not really. Just another quirky gadget that ended up in the tech graveyard. But hey, at least it tried to answer the age-old question, what does the cat actually want? RoboShear fail. All right, y'all, here's one you probably didn't see coming, robotic sheep shearers. Yep, people actually tried to automate sheep shearing with machines. Sounds like a futuristic flex, but turns out this tech got left in the dust. Since the 1980s, engineers in places like Australia have been trying to build robots that could do the job faster, cleaner, and with less stress on the sheep. And sure, some prototypes showed promise. But here's the thing. Sheep? They don't just stand still and vibe. They wiggle, they kick, they move like they're on espresso shots. That made it nearly impossible for robots to shear with the precision and care that skilled human shearers have. Cuts, missed patches, and awkward handling were all part of the problem. Not to mention the tech was hella expensive, and farmers weren't exactly lining up to replace reliable shearers with glitchy bots. Even today, some companies are still testing robotic systems, but guess what? Manual shearing is still the GOAT. Fast, efficient, and surprisingly low-key artistic. So why did this high-tech dream end up abandoned? Simple. Real-life farming is messy, unpredictable, and way harder to automate than folks think. It's a classic case of tech sounding awesome on paper, but flopping hard in the field. Literally. Fashion flop. In the 1960s, people were rocking paper clothes. Yeah, you heard that right. Actual dresses made of paper. It started as a marketing stunt and turned into a full-blown fashion craze for about 5 minutes. Companies started cranking out these wild, disposable outfits. Bright colors, bold prints, and pop culture all over them. Some even came with coupons printed on the hem. You could literally wear your advertisement and then toss it in the trash the same day. Wild, right? But surprise, surprise. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. These things were cheap but also super flimsy. Rain? Total disaster. One wrong move and boom, instant wardrobe malfunction. They were itchy, tore easily, and forget about tossing them in the wash. The hype faded as fast as it came. Fashionistas moved on, and paper dresses got tossed into the "what were we thinking?" bin of history. Still, for a hot second, they were the next big thing. So why'd it die so fast? It was fun, funky, and flashy, but not built to last. Kinda like a TikTok trend before TikTok was even a thing. And hey, some of those original paper dresses are now in museums. From fast fashion to fine art, how's that for a plot twist? Mask tech meltdown. Let's talk about one of the strangest tech experiments to come out of the COVID era. Bluetooth face masks. Yep, we're talking masks that didn't just filter air. They could take calls, play music, and even translate languages. During the pandemic, everyone was scrambling for ways to stay safe and stay connected. So, boom, engineers started building smart masks, loaded with Bluetooth, mics, speakers, the whole 9 yards. On paper, it sounded futuristic as hell. Talk hands-free, listen to tunes, and never pull your mask down. Pretty slick, right? But here's where it tanked. These things were bulky, pricey, and kinda awkward. Battery life? Meh. Audio quality? So-so. And once people stopped masking up 24/7, the hype fizzled fast. Most folks realized, wait, I already have earbuds. Why am I wearing a tech mask like I'm in a sci-fi reboot? Even though the idea was low-key genius for the moment, the market just wasn't feeling it long-term. It went from high-tech hero to clearance rack reject real quick. So, what happened to Bluetooth masks? Pretty much ghosted. They had their 15 minutes, then disappeared like sanitizer shortages and banana bread trends. One thing's for sure, pandemic tech had some wild moments, and this one definitely earns a spot in the abandoned Hall of Fame. Steam machine shutdown. This one's a major what could have been. Back in 2013, Valve dropped the mic with a bold idea: steam machines. These were supposed to be the ultimate hybrid, PC power with console convenience, all running on Valve's custom Steam OS. Sounds like a win, right? Not so much. The goal was to bring PC gaming to the living room, minus the complexity. Just plug in, boot up, and start slaying. But here's the thing, there were too many versions from too many manufacturers, all priced differently with no clear winner. Confusing specs, mixed performance, and a Linux-based OS that didn't support most top-tier games at launch? Yeah, that's a hard sell. On top of that, PC gamers weren't trying to ditch their rigs, and console players already had PlayStation and Xbox locked down. Steam machines ended up in this weird no man's land. Too niche for console fans, not flexible enough for PC folks. By 2018, Valve quietly pulled the plug. No big announcement, no farewell tour, just gone. But here's the twist. Steam machines did change the game a bit. They helped spark Valve's hardware journey, leading to stuff like the Steam Deck, which actually is killing it right now. Still, Steam machines? Total flop. Another flashy idea that just couldn't level up. NetPC letdown. Let's rewind to the mid-90s, back when Microsoft and Intel were running the tech game. That's when they rolled out the NetPC, hyped as the next big thing for businesses. But spoiler alert, this one crashed hard. The idea behind NetPCs was simple. Strip down regular computers into lean, locked-down machines. No floppy drives, no CD-ROMs, no messing around. They were designed to keep employees from breaking stuff and make it guys' lives easier. Just plug in, log on, and work. Sounds clean, right? But there was one big problem. Nobody liked them. They weren't cheaper than regular PCs like they were supposed to be. Plus, users hated how limited they were. Imagine trying to get work done on a computer that barely lets you do anything outside of a strict corporate bubble. Yeah, no thanks. And get this, businesses weren't saving money either. Between the hardware costs and the server setups needed to keep these things running, it just didn't add up. By the early 2000s, the whole NetPC concept had faded into the background, buried under newer, more flexible tech. Most people forgot they even existed. It was one of those corporate sounds good on paper ideas that totally missed the vibe of what real users wanted. So next time someone tells you the 90s were full of untouchable tech hits, just say two words: NetPC. Modular phone flop. Remember Project Era? Google's big plan to create a fully customizable smartphone? Swap out the camera, upgrade your battery, plug in a new speaker, all without buying a brand new phone. It was going to be game-changing. But here's the truth. It never even made it past the concept stage. Modular phones had one job: give users full control. The idea sounded fire: eco-friendly, affordable upgrades, and no more wasting money on a full device when one part goes bad. Era had us dreaming of snapping pieces on like Lego bricks. But in the real world, it was a tech nightmare. Manufacturers struggled to make the modules compact, fast, and durable. The designs were clunky, the parts didn't play nice together, and performance took a hit. Not to mention, most people don't really want to build their phone like a science project. By 2016, Google officially pulled the plug. Other companies tried to keep the dream alive, like LG and Motorola, but their modular efforts flopped too. Turns out, we all wanted freedom, until it came with screws, trade-offs, and lag. So why'd it get abandoned? Simple, too ambitious, too complicated, and the market just wasn't down. Modular phones go down as one of the coolest ideas that never got to flex. Gesture control ghosted. Let's talk about something that looked straight up futuristic but totally fizzled: gesture control for computers. You know, waving your hand to scroll, pinch to zoom in midair, or flick your wrist to switch tabs like you're in a spy movie. For a hot minute, companies were hyped. From Microsoft's Kinect to fancy wearable sensors, everyone was betting big on the idea that we'd ditch keyboards and mice for full-blown Jedi-level hand moves. But here's the thing: gesture control was cool, until it wasn't. Accuracy was hit or miss. Sometimes it'd work smooth, other times it looked like you were just flailing around trying to swat a fly. Plus, holding your arms up all day? Yeah, that gets real old real fast. It's called gorilla arm syndrome, and it's a vibe killer. Turns out the old keyboard and mouse combo is hard to beat when it comes to speed, comfort, and just working consistently. Even voice control got ahead in the race. Sure, some of the tech is still hanging around in gaming or VR, but for everyday use, it's basically ghosted. So what happened? Simple. Gesture control was flashy, but not functional enough to stick. Another case of cool demo, no staying power. 3D TV bust. Remember when 3D TVs were supposed to be the future of home entertainment? Around 2010, you couldn't walk into an electronics store without being hit with 3D hype. Every brand, Samsung, LG, Sony, they all wanted that avatar magic in your living room. But here's the real story. 3D TVs flopped hard. At first, it felt like a game changer. Depth, immersion, that reach out and touch it vibe. But then came the headaches. Literally. You needed special glasses, and half the time they were uncomfortable or just straight up annoying. Watching with friends? Everyone needed a pair. And good luck if you lost them. Content was another issue. Besides a few big movies, there wasn't much to watch. Sports, news, regular shows, all still in boring old 2D. And don't get us started on trying to watch 3D and multitask. It was a total no-go. By 2016, even the big dogs started pulling out. Sales dropped, support vanished, and TVs quietly ditched the 3D label. Now, it's just a weird memory of tech that promised the world and barely delivered a weekend's worth of wow. So what happened? 3D TV was all flash, no follow-through. People realized they'd rather binge in comfort than mess with clunky glasses for a lil extra depth. Nintendo's Red Vision fail. Here's a blast from the past you might have missed. Nintendo's Virtual Boy. This was supposed to be the future of gaming back in the 1990s. A 3D console that let you dive into virtual worlds before VR was even a buzzword. Sounds sick, right? Well, it wasn't. The Virtual Boy hit shelves with all the hype in the world. Nintendo was riding high after Game Boy and SNES success. But when folks actually used it? Yeah, things got sketchy fast. For starters, the graphics were all red and black, like just red and black. The idea was to create immersive 3D visuals, but all it did was leave players with headaches, eye strain, and major discomfort. And the headset? Clunky as hell. You had to hunch over it on a table just to play. Portable? Not even close. Even Nintendo knew it was a miss. Just 1 year after launch, they yanked it off the shelves. Only 22 games were ever made for it, most of which barely made a dent. So what went wrong? It was ahead of its time and way off the mark. The tech wasn't ready, the design was awkward, and gamers weren't feeling the eye pain in exchange for wobbly 3D. Now the Virtual Boy's a collector's item, and a prime example of how even the GOATs can take an L Segway's silent exit. Let's talk about one of the biggest tech flops that had all the hype but none of the staying power, the Segway. When it launched in 2001, people were calling it the invention that would change the world. No cap. This self-balancing personal transporter looked like something straight out of the future. Quiet, sleek, and super intuitive. You just leaned forward to move and back to stop. It was supposed to replace walking, biking, maybe even cars in the city. Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos were both hyped about it, but reality hit differently. The price tag? Way too steep. We're talking thousands of dollars. And let's be real, most people weren't trying to drop that kind of guap to roll around like a mall cop. It didn't help that the thing looked kinda goofy, especially in a world that still wasn't ready for standing scooters on sidewalks. It ended up being used more by tour groups and police officers than the everyday commuter. By the time e-scooters and e-bikes came along, the Segway already felt like a relic. After years of declining interest, the original Segway PT was officially discontinued in 2020. No big send-off, no fireworks, just a quiet fade into the background. So what happened? Simple. Great tech, bad timing, and even worse PR. Laserdisc letdown. Before Blu-ray, before DVDs, there was a shiny beast called the Laserdisc. Back in the late 70s and 80s, this thing was hyped as the future of home video. High-quality visuals, better sound, and zero rewinding. It sounded like a win. But here's the kicker, it totally flopped. Laser discs were huge, like vinyl record huge. And yeah, they looked cool, but they were clunky to store, awkward to handle, and crazy expensive. You had to flip them halfway through a movie like a pancake. Plus the players? Not cheap either. Even though the picture was better than VHS, most folks just weren't down to spend that kind of cash for home movies. And when DVDs hit the scene in the late 90s, smaller, cheaper, easier, Laserdisc didn't stand a chance. Only hardcore collectors and AV nerds really stuck with it, while the rest of the world moved on. By the early 2000s, Laserdisc was basically ghosted. So what went wrong? It was a tech ahead of its time, no doubt, but way too extra for most households. Another flashy format that promised to revolutionize entertainment, but got left in the dust by something simpler. Mustang in the dust. We're talking about a 1968 Ford Mustang that sat untouched in a dusty old barn for 35 years. That's right, just sitting there, collecting dirt, rust, and who knows what, while the rest of the world moved on. This classic Mustang was originally a beauty, sleek body, roaring V8, a total head-turner back in its day. But over time, it got left behind. When it was finally found, the thing was filled with debris, busted panels, and cracked glass. Straight up looked like something pulled from a car graveyard. But here's where it gets cool. Someone saw the potential. Instead of scrapping it, a restoration team got to work. And yeah, it wasn't easy or cheap, but that beast was brought back to life. Fresh paint, rebuilt engine, new guts. It was fully revived, and now it's cruising again like it never missed a beat. So why did it get abandoned in the first place? Who knows? Could have been money, neglect, or just someone thinking they'd get to it later. But one thing's for sure. This Mustang went from forgotten to fire. And honestly, it makes you wonder how many more classics are sitting out there, just waiting for their glow-up. Tech left in the dust. It's a time to rewind way back to the OG tech that paved the way. Stuff like the Ditto machine and flash powder. These old-school tools were once the real deal, absolute essentials. Now, they're museum pieces with major retro vibes. The Ditto machine, aka the Spirit Duplicator, was your go-to for making copies before printers got smart. If you ever got a worksheet in school that smelled weird and had purple ink, yep, that was a Ditto. Teachers loved it, students kinda hated it. And the smell? Low-key unforgettable. Then there's flash powder, used in early photography to light up a shot like a mini explosion. Photographers would set it off with a flash pan and pray they didn't burn their eyebrows off. It got the job done, but man, it was extra. As tech evolved, both of these legends got the boot. Laser printers, photocopiers, and digital cameras came through and changed the game. Way safer, faster, and way less smoky. But here's the thing, just because they're outdated doesn't mean they're forgotten. There's something kind of beautiful about how far we've come, and these old school tools are reminders of that grind. They weren't flashy, but they worked. So yeah, they've been abandoned. But the nostalgia? That's still alive and kicking. Which one shocked you the most? And what else is still out there, waiting to be uncovered? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like, smash subscribe, and turn on the bell. You won't want to miss what's next.